I've been looking forward to this. Welcome to Two Betrayals, featuring a big story reveal with multiple different factions duking it out, all to a giant nighttime snowy landscape. This level was simply iconic, and I have a secret to tell you about it too. It was one of the last levels to be completed by Bungie before Halo CE was printed and shipped. I'm talking long hours, a lot of work ahead, and some tough decisions to make about what to keep, and more importantly, what to cut. Which brings us to the topic of this video, Halo CE Restored, a video series and mod dedicated to restoring all of this cut content. And for this level, there's quite a lot. We've got entire unused areas, such as a fourth pulse generator. We've got cut weapons like the flamethrower, and we even have a drivable wraith, just to name a few. The level itself is broken up into 3 distinct canyons, all of which contain at least one pulse generator. The objective is to sabotage all of these generators to prevent the Halo ring from firing at maximum efficiency. Once the player sabotages one canyon's generator, the next canyon will open up. I'll cover each canyon's cut content, starting with the very first in the control room. So without further ado, here's the cut content in Two Betrayals. Let's first take a look at the opening cutscene, the big reveal.
Halo doesn't kill Flood, it kills their food.
If you've seen my prior videos, you probably already know about the 1749 beta build, but if you're new here, first off, welcome. Secondly, the 1749 beta build, as the name implies, is a playtesting build from around 2 months before Halo CE's final release. It's very unfinished, as you'd expect, but there's a lot of interesting things that we can glean from it that never made it in the final game, such as the number of Sentinels the monitor calls up as part of this opening cutscene. As part of the cutscene, exactly 4 Sentinels would appear behind the monitor, all big and scary, after Chief and Cortana to betrayal him, or he too betrayals you, however you want to interpret it. However, in 1749, there wasn't always going to be just 4 Sentinels here. No, the amount you'd have to fight was actually based on difficulty in this version. On easy or normal, there were 4, just like in the final release, but on heroic, there's 6, and on legendary, there's 9 Sentinels in this room. And to make matters worse, you don't start with a plasma pistol in this version either, so I don't know how you're expected to handle this, which is why I suspect they changed it to give you a plasma pistol. Now, while they went a little overboard with the amount of Sentinels, having a different number of Sentinels based on difficulty is still a neat idea. So for the restoration, on easy and normal, there will be 2 Sentinels in this opening fight. Heroic will have 4, like in the retail build, and legendary will have a much more reasonable 6 Sentinels. I also integrated the number of Sentinels into the opening cutscene as well. So if you're on legendary, yeah, Sparky's a little more menacing now. Next up, I want to talk about the excellent CE developer commentary talking about Cortana in particular. So something to notice throughout Halo CE is Cortana uses quite a bit of British lingo.
I've spent the last 12 hours cooped up in here watching you toady about,
which is interesting, to say the least.
That is absolutely unacceptable.
Sod off.
Well, as it turns out, Cortana almost was British.
Toady?
Well, do you remember why she says things like toady?
No.
Because originally you wanted Cortana to have a British accent, Jason.
What? You know what? That's actually true, because when we cast Cortana, we asked every woman to do an English accent for us at the same time.
Mid-Atlantic, maybe, kinda.
Imagine that world.
That wasn't supposed to happen.
So cute, Dads.
All right, moving on, let's head outside. It's at this point Cortana tells us that we need to buy some time.
In case the Monitor or his Sentinels find a way to activate Halo's final weapon without the index.
There are exactly 3 pulse generators in this level that we need to sabotage. Well, actually there's 4, but I'll get to that bit later. These generators are what allow Halo to fire deep into space. Without them, the Halo ring is essentially a giant, floating, overexpensive piece of shit.
Oh, a giant hula hoop!
So we make our way outside to the broader canyon and eye up our first pulse generator way up there in the sky. The intention here is to fight your way to the bottom of this pyramid structure all the way to a Banshee that's on the ground floor that you can use to fly up there. But perhaps this wasn't always how this was gonna play out. Have you ever noticed at the bottom of the canyon that door over there on the left side? Well, as it happens, It's unlocked. You can go through it. Yeah, instead of getting in the Banshee and flying to the pulse generator, you could instead make your way to these side rooms over here, perhaps even taking the elevator up to the ice bridge. But there's nothing particularly special about any of this. There's nothing in these side rooms nor up on the ice bridge. It's just empty. Almost like it was unfinished and maybe they forgot to lock this door. Digging a little deeper, we do have some unused checkpoints over here, but the real kicker is when we look over at 1749. In this build, we actually have cut spawns in these rooms, elites that would ambush you. And also, as you make your way down the pyramid, if you look up at the ice bridge, you'll see a couple elites battling Flood up here. If we take all these elements together in tandem, it becomes pretty clear that perhaps Bungie did plan for the player to have to come up here, maybe battling through enemies in these side rooms and up to the ice bridge itself. Now the question is, how would they prompt the player to even go through this way? Well, the most obvious answer would have to be the Banshee. It's your only means to get up to the pulse generator. So I imagine at some point in development, this Banshee was not down here on the ground floor, rather it was up on the ice bridge itself. Perhaps with Cortana highlighting them when you reach the bottom of the pyramid. Now with that question answered, let's next look at these side rooms themselves. 1749 has Covenant on the first floor of these side rooms, which makes sense because the Covenant also have control of the entire canyon itself. But interestingly, 1749 also shows Flood coming out of the upper floor and pouring out onto the ice bridge. This all hints to me that perhaps this dug-in Covenant position wasn't so quite dug in. Maybe there was some containment, a quarantine effort maybe, to block off an outbreak that was happening in these side rooms, specifically the upper floor. Now with the ingredients set, let's build on this quarantine idea. First off, cut the music, too happy. We need something more spooky. Much better. Entering the hallway of this incomplete section, you're first greeted by a rather grisly sight in the hallways. Blood and guts all over the walls, and then more bodies once you go inside. You round the corner towards the center and spot an elite just pacing back and forth next to what appears to be two piles of bodies, stacked eerily similar to how you'd find them on keys. Whatever happened here, it wasn't pretty and doesn't spell good news for what's upstairs. But before seeing what comes next, let's first head back outside and recreate that elite ice bridge battle from 1749. For the restoration, first we have a grunt facing away from the upper side room door when suddenly a carrier appears. It wiggles its way over and yeah, rip the grunt. Then right after this happens, two elite pilots will appear from behind those banshees and fight even more carriers as they pour out of the hallway. You can see all this happening from afar as you make your way down the pyramid, just like how it was in 1749. Okay, now back to the spooky. Making your way to that elevator, suddenly the music picks up. There's infection forms swarming all over the elevator. You eliminate them, but that doesn't bode well for what's up above. And at the top, you see even more infection forms. You shoot at them, but then you hear something far worse. Flood combat forms in the next room. They now know you're there. You desperately fend them off and press forward, but now there's Flood with guns. No rocket Flood though, that would just be mean. And in addition to the music and blood here, I also took some care with the scenery up here as well. If you examine this upper floor, you'll see pools of Covenant blood just like downstairs, except there's no bodies. Look a little closer though, you'll see what happens. This was a fun one to put together. It combines all the hints and clues from all the different game builds into one rather cool gameplay segment. And it tells a story in and of itself. And after taking everything out, you finally make your way back outside and into those banshees you saw from below. Flying on up to our first pulse generator, we do have another change from 1749. At the entrance to the pulse generator, instead of Covenant pouring out of the hallway, it was instead Sentinels. Now, they were a bit busted, but it was easy enough to restore them properly for this outside portion. There were also going to be more Sentinels inside the pulse generator itself, but these were likely removed to not distract from Cortana's rather interesting way to blow up the generators.
We need to interrupt the pulse generator's energy stream. I've adjusted your shield system so that it will deliver an EMP burst to disrupt the generator.
That said, having a couple sentinels greeting the player when they open up the door, it still works rather well and isn't too distracting. I believe it makes more sense from a world building perspective to have all these sentinels around the generators as well. The monitor naturally would want to protect them. And that's it for our first canyon. Now we make our way towards the second. But before moving on, first I'd like to note a funny little bug I had to patch. So in retail, starting off in the control room, you can fall off this center platform and survive. Technically, it's not deep enough to cause a fall timer death. To get around this potential soft lock, Bungie implemented a kill trigger. When the game detects you fell off the platform, as the name implies, this trigger kills you. Here's a funny thing though, the way they implemented it for co-op is that if either player enters this kill box, it kills both players. One presumably from the fall and the other presumably from cringe. I did patch this to not do this, however. Now whichever player enters the kill box is the one that dies. Anyway, just a funny thing I wanted to mention. And now let's move on over to Canyon 2, or more specifically, those bridges towering above Canyon 2 that you'd have to cross on your way down. First, we have a squad of Needler grunts at the end of the first bridge. These grunts wind up going to bat with some Needler flood over on the other side. Next, as you're going across the second bridge, there's some additional shotgun flood at the end, similar to the grunts. Guessing these two squads were cut to save on resources. Now let's talk about the hallways connecting these two bridges. After that one notorious hallway with the rocket flood, there would be two flamethrower flood ambushing you as you turn the corner. These flamethrowers are actually part of a broader set that would be used all throughout the level, but were cut along with the flamethrower itself. As I said in my prior videos, the flamethrower used to be the weapon introduced in the second half of the game, instead of just the shotgun. Unfortunately, it came down to the wire and had to be cut before the game was released. These flamethrower flood, along with multiple all throughout the level, have been fully restored. Now let's move onward to the great outdoors of Canyon 2. And here we have something rather special, a player drivable Wraith. Oh yeah, so back in 1749, if the player were fast enough in this section, they could get to the Wraith on the far side before the elite could snatch it up. This was intentional too, as far as I can tell. The reason this idea was cut or patched or whatever was likely due to Bungie running out of time to actually finish the Wraith. It's hard to explain when something just controls like complete shit without just handing you the controller, or in my case, a whole ass keyboard. Just like, look at where I'm aiming and then where the mortar is actually going. It also moves really sluggish, it doesn't do a lot of damage, it's bad. Bungie very clearly ran out of time, but fortunately here in Nervy Land, we have infinite time. So to go about making this Wraith not terrible, I first started with Vengeful Vadam's multiplayer Wraith he uploaded to Nexus mods. This makes important fixes to the camera positioning, so where you aim is actually where you shoot. Imagine that. I then made additional modifications to this template. First making it destructible, then balancing the damage multipliers to work similarly to plasma grenades. For good measure, I then increased the overall damage of the mortar itself to the point to where it felt just right, turning what was a weak pancake into a true threat, a literal tank. Just a word of warning though, the damage increases also apply to when the Covenant are the ones driving, so just be careful, it's just overall better now. And as a final note for this first outside portion, there's a couple rooms down in the center next to a flipped ghost that's essentially a hidden ammo cache. Down here, there's unfinished scripting for a flood ambush, a flood combat form, and a carrier. They'd rush out from these two rooms and ambush the player once they come down. This is a minor thing, but seemed fun, so went ahead and restored this as well. And now we move on to our main event, the next part of this canyon, where we arrive at the massive tower looking down upon us. And next to this tower is another pulse generator, or should I say another two pulse generators. Yeah, playing through, you may have noticed that the entrance Cortana highlights at the top of this canyon is not the only entryway you can see. Directly on the other side of the tower, there's a similar looking entryway, but is unfortunately locked and never open to the player. Here's a neat thing though, if you were to somehow get past this locked door, it's not just empty on the other side. There's a hallway leading to a set of unused rooms. Connecting these rooms is a hallway similar to others you'd see throughout the level, except it's more dark and spooky. But here's the truly interesting thing about this set of unused rooms. The second room at the end of the spooky hallway contains geometry looking an awful lot like another pulse generator. So that's interesting. It seems that Bungie may have originally designed this level with 4 pulse generators in mind. I reckon this 4th generator was cut rather late in development too, because all the lighting you see in this unused section was already complete. I didn't have to generate it or put any background ambience, it was already done and ready to go right off the shelf. But that's all we have here, unfortunately, just an unused set of rooms. There's no spawns or other scripting crumbs hinting as to what Bungie may have been planning here. So to go about restoring this 4th generator, it's gonna take some creativity, some analysis of what's actually happening in this section overall. Alright, so the thing to note about this whole portion of the canyon, there's no flood anywhere, at least initially. The first time we actually see any flood is in the pulse generator room we go to in the final build. Only after deactivating this generator do you then come out to a canyon that's starting to get overrun. What I'm getting at here is that similar to those unused side rooms from the first canyon, Bungie seems to imply an ongoing quarantine effort by the Covenant, likely in a desperate attempt to secure any ground they can get. So perhaps after entering this canyon initially, we see the Covenant have the situation under control, maybe even using that tower as a forward operating position. Maybe then that overrun pulse generator we go to in retail, it's instead locked. No, it's the other one on the other side you have to go to instead. So we go inside this formerly unused generator area and find Covenant in the first room. Grunts, jackals, elites, you know the drill. Then we turn the corner to the dark and spooky hallway. And of course, you know I had to put a big glowy sword elite at the end. I mean, how could you not? He then magically sees you when you move forward and rush at you, which just adds to the tension. I meant the magical thing literally, by the way. That's what it's called. After killing this elite and making your way forward, you'll encounter a couple more jackals on the way, and after killing them, we arrive at our objective. The 4th, well, technically now 2nd pulse generator, the one that went unused in the final game. And now we start to make our way back. Uh-oh. That sounded a bit like an explosion. Well, that's probably fine. We'll just make our way back and see what all the commotion is about. Oh shit, a hectic scramble. The flood, they must have broken containment and they're blocking the only way out. So you use whatever you can, fight tooth and nail to get through the horde and finally back outside. But it's not looking much better out here either. The center area has been completely overrun, and on the other side, you see the source of that explosion. The flood have broken their containment. The facade is over. Slightly convenient though, because it does open the way forward to our now 3rd pulse generator, the very source of this canyon's infestation. And from here, things proceed as usual. You sabotage this generator and fight your way back outside. This was an absolute blast to put together, using all the context clues and expanding upon them to create a cool and engaging storyline. We now move on to the tunnels, or more specifically, the Broken Door section. Why is this section called Broken Door? No idea. This is the section where, unless you're speedrunning, you must proceed on foot through the remaining tunnels to the final canyon. If we look over at the 1749 beta, however, this section of the tunnel was completely unfinished. Not even a broken door, or any door for that matter. But we do at least have some nice lighting, you know, festive Christmas spirit or whatever. Despite this, all of this, there are some little nuggets here that hint at some of the things Bungie was workshopping. For example, unlike in the retail build, it wasn't just going to be flood in this section. There's elites and jackals scattered throughout that shoot at your banshee as you fly by. My guess is they scrapped this idea because they wanted to firmly imply the flood as the culprits behind the Broken Door's destruction. But there is still a way to integrate these cut Covenant spawns into the section in a way that preserves this idea. How this section works in the final build is you press the button, boom, then start making your way across the bridge. About a third of the way across, you'll then get a swarm of popcorn flood with some unarmed combat forms rushing in behind them. After killing them and making your way about 2/3 across, that's when all hell breaks loose. We got rocket flood, needler flood, shotgun flood, vanilla flood, chocolate flood, Costco flood. It's here that we can safely integrate those cut Covenant spawns from 1749. In front of you lies the door to the next canyon, and next to it is where some assault rifle flood and other nasties appear. What if, once they spawn, the door then opens up and out comes an elite commander flanked by 2 jackals? This idea flows naturally since the very next canyon features several entrenched Covenant positions. Makes sense, they'd want to scout out ahead and maybe find some reinforcements to help further secure the region. Except they run headfirst comparison to that same Flood platoon that we just found ourselves face to face with. It works well and fits into the 3-faction battle that this level highlights so well. And now we move on to my favorite moment in the entire franchise. The nighttime snow on foot while you battle your way through armies of Flood and Covenant alike, all to this epic music track. It's perfection. So perfect, in fact, that there's actually not much in the way of cut content for this whole portion. They honestly just nailed this first try, it seems. So, since there's not any cut content to speak of out here, let's just move on to our final pulse generator. As it turns out, the room containing our last objective was not always going to be just a single generic room. No, in the 1749 beta, this generator area was instead 2 rooms, a bottom floor and a top floor connected with a whole ass elevator. And it would be the top floor that would be the room containing the final pulse generator. This has always been really cool to me, just to see this absolutely bonkers room design, just completely different from the retail version. If you've seen my prior videos, you will recognize this whole layout from my assault on the control room restoration, serving as a cut side objective to unlock the tunnel bay door. This would involve flying up to this area and hitting a button on the first floor to unlock it, but of course I also left a little Easter egg for the explorers if they wandered upstairs. And now with this Two Betrayals restoration, it's time to blow it up. Looking over at 1749 again, upon entering it in this beta build, you'd be greeted by 2 elites right at the entrance. Now, when I first saw these elites, I had a bit of a eureka moment. It explains so much of what you find outside. In the final build, you'll notice it's only sentinels you'll see both outside and inside, but what I always found interesting is directly outside the pulse generator room, the weapons that Bungie gives you are a shotgun and a rocket launcher. Except neither of these weapons are particularly useful against sentinels, and I always found this really strange. It's just an odd choice of weapons. But these elites in 1749, as part of this expanded layout, well, it explains exactly why Bungie chose these weapons. They are fantastic to use against Covenant. So I reckon they were rushed to get this game out the door, and when they simplified the generator layout, they must have forgotten to rework the weapons left for you outside. Which is honestly just kind of cool to see how all these dots connect. Following this crumb trail, I redesigned the first floor to instead be a Covenant encounter, just like in 1749. I also added some signs of flood and equipment damage sprinkled in to give it some character. In fact, you'll remember this particular debris and fire used to be the button that unlocked the tunnel bay door as part of the assault on the control room restoration. For the Covenant encounter here in particular, I opted to first have the player come face to face with 2 invisible elites wielding energy swords. The ensuing shootout with them then attracts additional waves of grunts and jackals pouring in from the adjacent hallways. Then finally, at the very end, we have 2 elites guarding the hallway to the elevator. This all leads to a nice and satisfying combat progression. Oh, and of course, you know I had to add some music to this section as well. Felt too big and empty otherwise. My track of choice is actually my favorite in the game. The Lost Muse. If you've seen my prior videos, you'll recall that this track only plays once in the entire game. Specifically, it plays in the big room with the hunters and dead marines towards the end of Assault on the Control Room. This track is referred to as the Lost Muse because it was not included on the official Halo CE soundtrack. Marty O'Donnell would later acknowledge this as a mistake, a miss on Bungie's part, and release it separately online. I absolutely love this track, and after all the player has been through up until this point, its dark and mysterious ambience felt right at home for this last generator area. Now it's not just this ground floor, of course, we also have the upstairs, the room containing our final pulse generator. To tie back into retail having sentinels in this section, the pulse generator room upstairs does not have any Covenant, instead it's chock full of sentinels. To then connect this upper floor of sentinels with the lower floor of Covenant, I then added a dead grunt in the hallway, the implication being the sentinels are too dug in for the Covenant to advance with the numbers they have. This was also extremely practical as it allowed me to place a convenient plasma pistol so the player actually has something useful to fight the sentinels with. It all flows rather nicely and more importantly feels organic, perhaps in line with Bungie's intention had they not cut this whole layout. Next up, I have an interesting code comment to show you. In one of the scripting functions for this section, we have a to-do, need to get big sentinels from Jason. Jason, likely referring to Jason Jones, the project lead and also co-founder of Bungie itself. The big sentinels mentioned here in this to-do is likely referring to what would become the enforcers in Halo 2. As developers themselves mentioned multiple times in commentaries, oftentimes ideas and enemies that were cut in earlier Halos were fleshed out and completed in future titles. For example, the original concept for Silent Cartographer was to have the player killing a prophet. This was scrapped of course, but they would reuse this idea in Halo 2 with regret. Likely the enforcers also followed this same track. But unfortunately, all we're left with in Halo CE is this simple to do. No models, no AI, no nothing. Just a code comment promising what never was. They just ran out of time. And that's all we got here. We dispatched the remaining sentinels and sabotaged the fourth and final pulse generator. Now, as part of this final cutscene, there is something interesting. Oh, for fuck's sake. This damn cutscene. Okay, so, yeah, the final cutscene for this level is assuming the old generator layout on the first floor. But now it's on the second floor. But, you know, the camera angles and flags, they still assume the first floor, which is hilarious.
But I'm pretty sure I can pull it from here.
I did not leave it this way, of course. I used a very honed and ancient technique in games programming. I took the camera angles and pushed it somewhere else! Yeah, you know, just move them in lockstep upstairs, except manually. Like write down the amount to move them and open calc, you get the idea. All right, back upstairs. I'll let Staten take it away from here.
Here comes the best exposition of the game.
That runs throughout Halo.
Of course there is.
That's how the monitor moves about so quickly.
That's how the monitor was about. Okay, yeah.
Listen to how fast Jen is talking.
Yeah, because you wrote this like in the last second before she showed up.
Well,
why is that, Joe? So how are you going to like distract people from saying, why haven't you been using this method of
let
transportation
me just
this
say
whole
the
time?
worst moment.
And that will distract us from thinking about why we're using this transportation grid for one time only.
Yeah, I'm thinking in the cinematic that came before that one, the chief just should have started hitting his head a lot to distract people from that dialogue.
This is just funny. They cut a level but need to connect it somehow in a way that's reasonable-ish. So teleportation, why not? Sure. I mean, they could have just ended it here and Chief flies into the keys level and the portion outside is where we start, but of course then we wouldn't get this fun cutscene. Teleportation. We're gonna never mention this ever again. And that's all I have to show you today. That's the cut content in Two Betrayals, and what a level. Seeing all that it has to offer just in retail and knowing all the different twists and turns, cut areas, cut enemies, vehicles, everything, it just comes alive in a way that makes my childhood brain practically explode. I wonder what it could have truly looked like had it not been created so late in development. Would many of these ideas have made it in, perhaps? Before I sign off, I'd like to cover a couple additional things. Firstly, I have to give special thanks to my friend Creon. I had to-dos listed on the mod page to fix two things. The first being the hallway lights for the final pulse generator layout, which would change between loading duns thanks to 1749's different lighting schema. The second to-do is a destroyed model for the tank. Rather than it just appearing fine after being blown up, no, have an actual model for a destroyed tank. Creon's been helping with much of the research for the series and is also much more adept at Blender than I am. Creon went ahead and not only fixed the hallway lights, but also put a lot of work into creating a really cool looking destroyed tank model, even adding a cool effect for the cannon after it's destroyed. It's just awesome. So huge shoutouts to him. And secondly, I added a drivable Wraith to assault on the control room. Since we have a working Wraith now, it seemed like it'd be fun and vehicles are cool. So that's what I did. And that's all I have to show you today. A reminder that while this series is ongoing, I do host votes for which level I'll cover next. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss them, especially if you have any strong opinions, blah, 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 I'm the greatest. Anyway, here's a scrandle. Which one of these looks more delicious?